I'm retired Battalion Chief Larry Cockman, Chairman of the Greensboro Fire Department History Book Committee. The American Fire Service is rich in tradition and culture. A firefighter's life is filled with many emotional highs and lows. Stories of major fires, national disasters, medical calls, firehouse living, and family life are often verbally shared from one generation to another. Many times these stories are lost forever when a firefighter passes away. In an effort to preserve these stories, in 2019, the Greensboro Fire Department History Book Committee launched a new program of recording audio-video of our retirees' lives. These stories will be shared on our website, gfhbc.org. In 2020, we did not record because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Please listen as these firefighters share their life experiences with all of us.
My name is Jeff Younts. I'll soon be 55 years old. I was a captain when I retired. Came on the fire department in 1989, July the 1st, 1989, and I retired. My last full day with the city was December 31st, 2018. I'm from Guilford County originally. Before I became a firefighter, I was a mechanic. I worked at Cummins Diesel here in town. And my dream was to always be a firefighter, but my dad wanted me to be a mechanic. He thought it was more lucrative and, I guess safer. So he kind of pushed me into that. He helped send me to school to learn diesel engine technology and such. And I thought, well, I'll try it, see, I might like it, whatever. But in the back of my mind, since I was 6 years old, I was always going to be a fireman. That's all I ever wanted to do. Well, it's kind of odd. Everybody says I was nuts for doing it, but when I was 6 years old, I was playing with matches in the woods, and I set the woods on fire. And to keep from getting in trouble, I tried to put the fire out myself. And I had on a polyester shirt, had my shirt tail out. And while I was stomping the flames out, they were up pretty high, and I was fairly short, so the fire caught my shirt on fire. And I wound up in the hospital here in Greensboro for 2.5 months for burn treatment. And after Cone Hospital, the local hospital, did everything they could do for me, the Shriners got involved. And the Shriners, at that time, they had 2 hospitals here, I guess, on the East Coast. There was one in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I think the other one was in Florida. But they sent me to the Shriners Burn Hospital for continued care in Cincinnati. And while I was in Cincinnati, some firefighters came through the burn ward visiting the kids. And that sparked my interest. They actually gave me a toy fire truck and that kind of thing. So from that point on, I knew what I was going to do. Well, it's kind of weird. The process, the first time I tried, it was a lot different. You basically went down to the Employment Security Commission. You do little finger dexterity tests. I'm sure y'all probably remember the older guys where you pick the washers up and set them, put them on a peg over here and see how many you could do in a minute and all that kind of thing. But the time where I actually got hired, they had officially came up with a process. You took a written test, see how you did on that, and if you did well enough, you got invited back, whatever, and you could go do a physical abilities test. And it's now known as the Combat Challenge, whatever. It's been modified since 1989, but for the most part, it's the same as what it was then. And when I was running that test, I thought, you know what, I don't know if I got what it takes or not because this is killing me. As a young guy, I was 22 years old coming out of the mechanic business. I was making almost $30,000 a year doing that. And I thought I was going to starve to death. When I saw my first check, I thought, uh-oh, I've made a mistake. In training, we had 30 members from Greensboro in our class, and we also had 2 members from Reedsville Fire Department, another local fire department, that went through training class with us, which both of them, ironically, wound up coming back to Greensboro and were hired by Greensboro, but they had to go back through training again. Well, going through training, I didn't really, at 22 years old, I really didn't have any problem with the physical part of training. Mine was more of the academic side, which I wasn't terribly far out of high school, but it's just like anything else, particularly the math part. Just about everybody struggles with hydraulics going through training. Back then, I mean, it was a lot more involved in what it is now. And the mental part of training was harder on me than the physical part was, because I was in good shape. I could do whatever I wanted to then. But the combination of the physical part on the drill ground and the PT and such as that, in combination with knowing that if your average dropped below 70 while we were in training, I mean, you didn't get another chance. You're done. Out the door you go. So knowing that I could be fired if I let my grades drop, which I didn't have that problem because I graduated with a 94 average, but just knowing that in the back of my mind was stressful to me. Some of the people I went through training with, probably the ones that I hung out with the most, Jackie Beard, he passed away on a training exercise. Mike McLean and Chris Barracks, we studied together every night. I spent more time at Mike McLean's house than I did my own house for the 16 weeks we were going through training. Mike Carlson, Brian Washburn, Mike Swales, who just retired as a deputy chief. A lot of my classmates did really well and got promoted along the way. Let's see, Terry Rankin, Keith Hurd. I think Keith is actually still working. One funny story that I can tell from training, I mean, naturally, what goes on behind closed doors normally stays behind closed doors, but one thing we did is during sprinkler training week, everybody tries to wet the instructors. It's just part of tradition. They know it's coming. We know it's coming. It's just a matter of, can you get them? Can you not get them? Well, two of my training officers, one of them was Captain David Spears. The other one was Captain Charlie Jones. And they knew what we were getting ready to do. So while we were in there learning to plug sprinklers and getting soaking wet and all that kind of stuff, some of us went down one floor and snuck out on the fire escape and come back up, and we thought we had them trapped, but they got away. And they ran all the way back to the training building, and they locked the door on us, and we couldn't get in. And they had a pretty good head start on us, so we couldn't catch them. But back then, Charlie Jones was smoking about 2 packs of cigarettes a day, and I swear you could hear him breathing through the door. And we laughed at him and thought, if we'd had to chase you another 100 feet, you would probably died. But things like that. We eventually got them wet, but it wasn't in sprinkler class. We had to wait till we were doing a live burn, and we got them with 2.5s.
That's good.
Well, in training, I knew this was the job that I was meant for. Like I say, I've always, after I was burned and met the firefighters and they came by and spent some time with me, I knew what I wanted to do. And I knew when I was already a volunteer. I'd volunteered for about 4 years before I got on with the city. So I knew that was the right career path for me. It was just trying to get hired with a municipal fire department. That was the hard part. And I had applications in everywhere. I was going to be a firefighter or bust. I had actually applied for High Point, Winston, Greensboro, Charlotte. And so I wasn't really tied to one spot. I preferred Greensboro because I already lived here and I knew people around. But I was going to be a firefighter if I had to go somewhere to another state. I didn't care. I mean, that's just what I wanted to do. My first station and first apparatus assignment, when I came out of training, we graduated on October the 21st, 1989, and I was assigned to Truck 7, which is now called Ladder 7. My first captain was Captain Chuck Smith. I think he's one of your buddies. Great guy, probably gave me better career advice than anybody through my whole 30-year career. He told me, he said, "Rookie, this is the way things are right now. This is the way things are going to go. The writing's on the wall. So I would advise you to go ahead and get involved, start going back to school, get your degree, that kind of thing." He was absolutely right. On my original assignment, at Station 7 at that time, there was an engine, a ladder, and a squad. There was 2 assigned to the squad. They were just starting to change over at that point and put more people on the ladder trucks, because before that it had been 2 assigned to the ladder, and the squad would come and work in conjunction with the ladder boys. But they had changed the workflow, and the squad was then attached to the engine. And we had 4 people, actually when I got out of training we had 5 people assigned to the ladder. There was Captain Chuck Smith, Irvin Latta was my driver, Jimmy Gwynn was the second driver, Danny Edwards, who graduated with me, and then me. And then on the engine, there was Captain Woody Parrish, Steve Stone, Randy Mabe, and Tommy Brown. And then assigned to the squad on our shift was Larry Patterson and Ty Miner. Well, the biggest nickname that I got was I got transferred from Station 7, my original assignment, and I went to Station 1. And Captain Nelson, he's always competitive. And we would always try to find something that I could do that he couldn't do, or he could do that I couldn't do. And we were doing, I don't remember how we got on it, but we wound up trying to do the limbo and stuff like that. And I was really, really flexible. So Captain Ralph Sutton, who passed away several years ago, he nicknamed me Gumby. So most people nowadays don't know who Gumby is, but that was my nickname, was Gumby, because I was so flexible. Now I'm not that flexible anymore. Well, probably I'll try to keep the prank stories kind of clean, but some of the funnier stories is there was one guy, he loved fireworks and stuff like that, and you could be standing in the shower and a bottle rocket would come shooting into the shower stall, and I finally learned you don't try to run from it, you just try to get it wet and put the fuse out. Different stuff, just people messing with you all the time, taking a glove and cutting the finger off of it and tie it up and it looks just like a rat. We would put that. Now, one thing I thought I was going to get fired over this one, I put it in the coffee cup cabinet. In the firehouse, everybody's going to the coffee cup cabinet first thing. So Chief Coble opens the door. The mouse comes flying out and it scares him, and he was terrified of mice. And he got mad and he tore it down. He said, if that thing shows back up again, he said, I'm going to fire somebody. So I'm standing there, I'm over here laughing. He don't know I had put it in there, but he threw it in the garbage can. Well, he's standing there talking to somebody and he wasn't paying attention. I go over there and get the mouse back out of the garbage can, and I go over and stick it right back in the coffee cup cabinet. Well, he gets done drinking his coffee. He had his own special cup. He'd go over there, he washed his cup out, dried everything off, and he snatched that door open, gonna put that coffee cup back in the cabinet again, and the mouse jumped back out at him again. That's one of the funniest ones. Now, I had to leave the kitchen that time because I really thought he was going to fire me, but he threatened to fire me about 1,000 times throughout my career, but he never did do it. Every station that I was ever at, we always tried to do things together. It's easier when you live in the older fire stations because you have like the community bedroom where all the guys sleep in one room and the officers have their own room. Where I started seeing problems with cohesiveness within the company or within the station is when I got promoted to captain, I went to Station 21, and the way 21 was built, all the officers had their own rooms, and all the firefighters on the back of the truck, the drivers and firefighters, they had cubicles that they could go to. And throughout the day, at some point, somebody was always disappearing, and they would go, everybody wants their privacy, whatever, but they would start going to their own cubicles. And I saw that we were going to have to make a concerted effort to keep that cohesiveness within the company and within the station, because it's real easy to start doing your own thing, go spend time by yourself. Everybody wants a little alone time, and it's hard to do in the older stations with the community bedrooms. But what I found is I feel like the older stations made the people bond, because you sleep together, you shower together, you eat together, you cook together, you go to the store together, you do everything together. Sitting around the kitchen table is very important. That's where the stories are told, that's where the lessons are learned. Whether it's over a meal, over a cup of coffee in the morning, at shift change, there are so many life lessons and career lessons learned at the kitchen table. To me, that was invaluable to me because I learned so much from the older guys, and I made an effort once I got to be a company officer to always keep that going. We always cooked together. No matter how good or bad somebody could cook. I was the worst cook in the fire department, but I cooked. I took my turn. They didn't always like it, but we sat over that meal. They picked at me about my meal. I picked at them about their meal. Whether it's good or not, you're not going to tell them it's any good. But, the kitchen table, that's where it's at. Well, the only thing I could really cook that was decent was chicken and dumplings. I didn't cook them a lot because it was a big messy meal. I know you remember Doug Reed. He taught me to cook chicken and dumplings. He taught me to make the dumplings and make biscuits and such as that. But I didn't really do that a lot because it was so time consuming and so messy, but that was my favorite, was the chicken and dumplings. Well, as far as people talking about their families and extracurricular activities, and everybody's got a side job, we talk about our side jobs, whatever. The way the fire stations are designed now, and I guess people have changed too. That's starting to go away a little bit, I guess. But like I say, we made a concerted effort to always eat together and play together and all that. My last assignment was at Station 14. I was the company officer on Ladder 14, and everybody there, like most of us love baseball, so we'd sit around and watch baseball games together, or on Sundays we'd watch football games together. Super Bowl Sunday, everybody would bring stuff in. We really made an effort to keep that cohesiveness together. Now, we didn't always do a lot of stuff off duty together, but while we were on duty, 90% of the time you would find at least half of the guys together all the time. Somebody might be studying for a test, or somebody might be doing a report, but the majority of the guys were always together. Well, as far as off-duty activities, I think some people, you become such close friends, and when you see your friend needs help, you go help them. So like when I first came on, if somebody was building a house, everybody would, on that shift if they could, and even people from other stations or whatever, they would always, I mean, that's how the firefighter club was built. People just showed up and the firefighters built this club. It would be the same thing if I was building a house. I know I've seen like Steve Stone, Chief Weaver, when they're building houses, they all built houses together. So when they got done with Steve Stone's house, they'd go help Chief Weaver build his house. And then Chris Bowman, they'd go help him build his house. So everybody would work together. And a lot was accomplished just free labor or sweat equity, whatever you want to call it, because I help you, then you help me. I come help you put a roof on, pour a concrete driveway. Everybody, there's a firefighter that knows how to do something all the time, whether it's electrical, a plumber, concrete guys, excavation, that's what I do. There was always somebody that knew how to do a particular job, and they would help each other. So I don't know how much of that is going on now. I think there's still some, but like how it was when I first came on, I mean, it was every day. But nowadays, everything's so expensive. Each firefighter has at least one part-time job, and some of them have 2 part-time jobs. They don't have the time for that off-duty stuff the way that it used to happen. And that's just the way it is. I mean, time changes, other things change, and it forces you to change. Well, from the other side of it, I tried to listen. I always tried to pay attention to what the older guys ahead of me were doing. And sometimes when a retired firefighter would come over, stop by to visit, I remember Captain Scott used to come by Station 1 all the time. Now, I think he retired in like 1975 or 77 or something like that. You know, he always had his little goatee and his mustache and everything, and he kind of looked like Colonel Sanders. And I didn't have any idea who he was. But my driver at the time, Bob McLean, Bob knew him. Bob worked for him, worked with him. And he said, look, he said, when these guys come in, he said, you're going to be there one day. He said, when they come in, you stop and talk to them. He said, you may not know them, they may not know you, but somebody needs to speak to them and spend a little bit of time with them because they put their time in. He said, so always try to remember that. So, I mean, every time I've gone back to the stations, which I still know a lot of people, you know, I've only been gone 3 years, so it's not like I'm talking to a bunch of strangers. There's still a lot of people there that I know, but in 5 years when I show up, I'm probably not going to know anybody. So hopefully they'll still stand around and talk, but you know, for the retirees' sake, it does them good to make them feel like they're still a part of the organization, you know, and feel needed and wanted. But as the retiree, I've had the opportunity to sit down and went by Station 56, and there was a few young guys there, and they said, well, since you've been retired a couple of years, what's your advice to these young guys? And, you know, I gave them some advice as far as invest all you can while you're working. Don't live outside your means. Plan your education, get your education so that you can advance. Try to advance as quick as you can. I tried to give them some life lessons, things that I learned along the ways because of, like Chuck Smith or my first driver, Irvin Latta, was telling me about investing. I knew nothing about investing, but he told me, he said, look, here's your opportunity. And he showed me how it could work for me. So as a retiree, if you know something like that, you go by the fire station, sit down and talk with them, tell the young guys what they're in for. I remember my first call was off of Lee Street. I think it was on Burbank Street. It come out as an apartment fire and turned out to be food on the stove, so we didn't really get to do anything because we were coming from Station 7 and Engine 4 got there first. So, you know, they handled it with their own fan. So they evacuated smoke, whatever, so we went back. So that was my first call. My first fire, I had to rove one day. Back then, the rookie always done the roving. There was no question when they needed somebody somewhere, the rookie was gone. So for my first fire, I was actually at Station 14. And we went over off McKnight Mill Road, and we had a really good apartment fire. It was 2-story apartments, but the fire was only in one apartment. And Captain Harris, Larry Harris, he was the captain then. And so he was glad to have some young guys out there that wanted to go in, wanted to fight fire, that kind of thing. So he was tickled to death to see me, and I was tickled to death to get the nozzle. So the rookie didn't get the nozzle very often. Well, the value of responding to medical calls is everybody knows that there's more fire stations than there are ambulance bases. They can only go so far. They're spread really thin. And as an employee of the city, it's our job to see to the citizens' needs, whether that's picking up their garbage cans, making sure they got water, or especially in a life or death situation, is to be there to handle the worst emergency they'll probably ever see. Anytime you go to somebody's house, you're seeing them on their worst day usually. We got some frequent flyers, stuff like that, that's not necessarily in bad shape or whatever, but for the most part, when the people call, they need you. So when you go to their house on a med call, their loved one or they themselves are in a bad way medically, and I feel like if there's anything you can do to help, you do it. I don't care how trivial it is. I've gone and helped pick elderly people up out of the floor, just put them back in the bed. I don't care. I figured I was a city servant and that was my job. And I tried to always keep that attitude. Now you get frustrated with some, but for the most part, you owe it to the citizens to do your best. There's always calls that are going to bother you because you see people. I told somebody the other day, there's a lot of things that I've seen that I wish I could unsee. And I've seen people at their best, which were my coworkers, and I've seen people at their worst, how they can treat other people, the things they do to them, the way they abuse them, shootings, cuttings, things of that nature, just general meanness. So there is a lot of stuff that I wish I could unsee. I had told one of my rookies, we went on the call. I don't know if you remember, I don't even remember what year it was, but when we had the big apartment fire and the 4 college students didn't survive it over at Campus Walk. Well, we weren't on that call. I came in the next day, so we went over to do recovery. And I told Pat Henley, he was my captain at that time, I told him, Pat, this is the worst day of my career. I said, if I never see anything like this again, having to deal with the parents, that was the worst part. But if I never see anything like this again, I'll be a happy man. Well, it turns out I was wrong. That was not the worst day of my career. The worst day was on Everett Street, the day that Jackie Beard passed away. Jackie and I went through training together. We were really tight. He was the oldest. He was 42 when he started training. And I was only 22. I don't know why we bonded, but we bonded. And, you know, we both like farming stuff, cows, horses, whatever. And for some reason, Jackie and I immediately bonded. And the day I was the last firefighter to talk to him when he passed away. And I was sitting there looking at him in the eye when he took his last breath. And it was almost a month before I could even talk to my wife about that. We went to some critical stress debriefing sessions, stuff like that. I couldn't even talk to the people. It hurt me so bad to lose my friend. I can't imagine what the firefighters in New York went through when they lost 343. So that was the worst day of my career, and it almost pushed me to the point where I wanted to leave. To be honest with you, I've never really I told my wife, I don't know why, because Jackie wouldn't have quit if something would have happened to me, and I guess that's what kept me going. But I had actually thought about leaving at one point because it hurt me so bad to lose my friend like that. So Some of the bigger fires, bigger incidents that I was on, we were on one big hazmat call that it kind of scared everybody. Matter of fact, I was driving you that night, and we had
Scared?
I scared you going through town when we were going to Station 4 to get the command post, and it turned out it wasn't there. It was at the garage having the brakes fixed on it, so we had to swing by the garage on Patton Avenue. Well, the incident was down on Broome Road, and they had, I don't remember how many thousands of gallons of toluene, as in trinitrotoluene, and it was within like 2 degrees of letting go. And had it rose about 2 more degrees, they said it would have blasted the whole city block. And me and you both looked at each other like, uh-oh, we shouldn't be here. But some of the bigger fires that I was on, probably Cedar Street. We had several downtown. 320 South Elm Street. I remember that one vividly because if it weren't for a couple of good officers recognizing what was going on, there was about 25 firefighters in that building, and by the time we got everybody out, the guys from Squad 5 or Rescue 5, they looked like rats bailing off a sinking ship coming out the windows and stuff. And about 2 minutes after the last one put his foot on the sidewalk, the building fell in, the roof fell into the basement.
Who were those officers, you remember?
One of them was Eddie Nix. Eddie was always a great company officer, good person, good friend, but the guy probably knew more about firefighting. Phil May was another great officer, but he wasn't on that call. Chief Hahn, he was the commander on scene at that time. Let's see, I had a fire in what used to be called the Jefferson Building. I think it's called the Lincoln Financial Building now. We had a fire on the 5th floor there. Funny story there is one of the firefighters, we had been to a benefit thing at a local church in our area, and she had eaten, if she watches this, she'll know who it is. It was pinto bean dinner, and she ate too much. And by the time we got to the 5th floor, she needed to refill. She got sick in the stairwell. Let's see, other big fires that we've had. I've actually was on the Natty Greens fire twice. We burnt Bertner's pharmacy downtown. I was on a lot of big house fires because I was, for 14 and a half of my years of my career, I spent at Station 1. So we had several pretty good fires over in Old Irvin Park in those old, 100-year-old houses or whatever they were. So I've been on a lot of good incidents. Well, other than the fact that I knew what those guys were going through that lost their friends. Like I say, they lost 343 firefighters on 9/11. So it didn't really affect me a lot as a firefighter, except for the fact that I knew how they felt with that. I lost one, they lost 343. And I could understand their agony, the thoughts of maybe I should get out of this career. I knew a lot of them were probably going to have those thoughts after losing my friend Jackie. The way that it affected me most is I was like that close to going to a recruiter and signing up for the Army. I thought about joining the National Guard or whatever, and I talked to my wife about it, and she said, look, you got 2 little kids here at home. Both of my kids were really small. Or matter of fact, my son wasn't born. My daughter, she was only 2 at the time. So she said, look, you got to take care of your family. You're serving. You're doing what you need to do. She said, think about it before you do it. So I didn't do it, but it almost made me go join the Army. Oh man, there were so many mentors through my career because I got to work. Some of them were super smart fire-wise. Some of them were super smart financial-wise. And I wasn't a smart guy, but I was smart enough to listen to the guys who were smart. So as far as fire department stuff, like Eddie Nix, when Eddie said something, I listened. When Phil May was way ahead of his time as far as tactics for ladder companies. He was teaching positive pressure ventilation and such as that long before the fire department ever said, okay, this is what we're going to do. But Phil was really smart. Ricky Willits, Captain Willits, he probably taught me more about being a company officer than anybody else that I worked for because he was the kind of guy, he was really, really active, especially considering, he was in the back end of his career at the time, but you couldn't tell it by watching him. I mean, you would think he was still 25 years old. And Ricky's theory was that if I'm going to tell you to do something as your supervisor, I'm going to be there with you to do it. And now, it's not always going to be possible, but if we were testing hydrants, here's a funny story about Ricky. Is one night we had a bunch of stuff to do. I don't remember what all it was, but we used to be responsible for maintaining the SCBAs and mowing the yard at Station 1, and it was huge, and all kinds of stuff like that. But we were trying to get our hydrants finished up, and we were out at 9 o'clock at night trying to finish up hydrants. And he always taught me, he said, when the fire department gives you something to do that's out of the ordinary, go on and get it done. Don't wait, don't procrastinate, because something else is going to come behind it and you don't want to be behind. So we were out there at 9 o'clock at night testing those fire hydrants, and I was messing with him all the time. I didn't really care one way or another, but I told him, I said, dang, Captain, I said, if these hydrants didn't glow in the dark, we'd never find them. He said, shut up and keep whining. So, I mean, but he was right there with you. He would sweat like you sweated. He would work as hard as you worked, probably outwork you. And that's just the kind of guy he was. So I always tried to be that kind of company officer. Once I finally got promoted, is I wouldn't ask my guys to do something that I wouldn't do. Sometimes I would go out and help them wash the truck. Sometimes I would help them do their personal cleaning duties in the morning, clean the truck bay, mop it, sweep it, whatever. So I always tried to do that just to let them know that I appreciated what they did, and that what they did wasn't going unnoticed. An appreciated employee will be a hardworking and good employee 99% of the time. So probably Captain Willits influenced me more than anybody. Well, as far as proudest moments that I had, most of them were call related. I was proud of what I was able to accomplish as far as getting promoted or being a good driver or whatever that was for me personally. But anytime we could effect a rescue, that was nothing builds camaraderie in the fire station like a good fire, and nothing builds pride like accomplishing what you set out to do on the fire scene, whether it's put the fire out or rescue the victims. Anytime we were able to save a life, whether it's CPR or, finding somebody in a fire, that was always my proudest. I don't have just one, but anytime we could do that, that was great to me. That's what made coming to work worth it. I worked with a lot of female firefighters throughout my career, and it never bothered me one way or another. I always figured they're good people. If they do their job and they look after me, I'm going to look after them. I never had an issue with it. I know some firefighters, particularly their wives, would maybe have an issue because there was, particularly in a station with a community bedroom, might have issue with it, but you make allowances for that. I mean, you have sleepwear or whatever you wear. It was never a problem, and I never had a problem with any of the females that I worked with. They all did their job. They were all well trained. They were smart. They did what they had to do. So no, I did not have a problem with any of the females I worked with. If I could go back in time and restart my career, would I? Yes, I certainly would. There would be a few things that I would, well, one thing in particular that I would change would be to improve my education level. One of the things that I talked about early in the interview was about how Captain Smith, Chuck Smith, told me what was coming as far as educational requirements to get promoted, stuff like that. I wish I would have went ahead and done mine earlier. Just bite the bullet, go do it all at one time early in my career, and it would open up more doors for me as far as promotion. That's one thing that I wish I would have done different. But, I did mine along the way, and I actually never did finish it. I'm like 2 or 3 classes short of a degree. And that would have been just basically bragging rights for me, because I don't think it would have pushed me to be promoted any earlier as the way that I did it if I'd have went on and finished it. But had I gone when Captain Smith told me, he said, go get your degree, I wish I would have went and done the whole thing right then. So if anybody's listening, go get your degree. How would I describe a successful firefighter? Somebody that really has the drive to do the job. Somebody that is willing to go back, get their education, whatever they need for promotion. Somebody that works hard every day, because this is not a career where you can come in and coast. You've got some that have made a career by coasting, but those are not the people that generally everybody would agree that I want that guy on my fire truck, or I want that guy on my fire scene. When I need to count on somebody, I don't want that guy. So I want somebody that lives, breathes, sleeps fire department when he's on duty. When you're off duty, I want the guy that knows how to take time with his family, spend time with them, raise his kids, work part-time if you have to support your family. That's the kind of mentality you got to be, because the people that are willing to do that are generally the hard workers in the fire station. I'm sure everybody has seen people that were, people that weren't, and how good they operated on the fire scene, how they were lacking. So I would say that would be my requirements. Significant others of firefighters certainly do play a part, because I always knew that, now I wasn't married when I first got on the fire department. I came on in '89 and I didn't get married until '95. I was testing her to make sure she was tough enough to stand up to the pressure, and she was. But my wife was probably one thing that helped keep me on the straight and narrow and keep me grounded. Because sometimes when you start having some success, your head wants to blow up a little bit, and she was always there to help me, remind me to keep me humble. At my low times, she was the one that was always there that I could talk to. Like I said, after Captain Beard passed away and I struggled so hard, I couldn't even talk to her about it. But eventually I got to where I could. And just having that support system at home is really important, whether it's your wife, your husband, whatever, if you're married, whatever. But faith certainly played a part, because a lot of times, I'll speak for myself, a lot of times you don't always understand why things happen the way they do. And I think between having my wife to talk to and my faith, having God to talk to, he helped me see life in a different manner. When I was younger, I thought I was 10 foot tall and bulletproof. And through some of these incidents, whatever, God says, all right, this is what you need to do. I'm talking to you. He said, I'm letting you see it. And so family and faith, both, they have to be a part, in my opinion, to help a firefighter endure a long and healthy career, healthy physically and healthy mentally. What would I like the fire department to remember me by? Well, if anything, that I cared, I did my job, I worked hard, and I helped others to advance. Particularly as later in my career, when I was a driver and a company officer, my job, I always felt like my job was to help the young people. Because somebody helped me get to where I was, and I felt like it was my job to pass along what I had learned. So if anything, I hope everybody remembers that if I worked around them or whatever and they needed help, needed advice, needed to learn something, I was always the one that was willing to work with them. I always took pride in that. I would like my family to remember that I always loved them. And I know a lot of times with the schedule and everything, or some of the calls that we went on, that I wasn't necessarily in the best mood or the right frame of mind. But just know that I always loved them, and that I'm proud of all of them, and that I did the best I could to provide for them and to be the best firefighter, the best husband, the best dad that I could be. I don't really care to leave a special message to anybody. I just, all the guys that are still around that helped me when I was young, we talked about Larry Patterson. I wish I could talk to him today. I've told him thank you several times, before he passed away. I appreciate what they did for me, because they didn't have to take the time out of their day to try to put me on a path to success, but they did, and I really appreciate those guys.
In closing, the Greensboro Firefighters History Book Committee hopes you have gained a greater insight into the dangers, the challenges, and emotional events that have influenced and shaped the American firefighter.